Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
That's right. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Mr. Cody Clickner, welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure trying to hunt down some good times for us, and pleasure getting to know you over the years. We got to give our friend Paul Shirley a nod. He might not listen to this. He's not in dad mode necessarily, but maybe we'll get him to peek at this one. But we had the good fortune of sharing some time at kind of a community and little networking gathering that Paul and I had facilitated called Victor over the last few years, which is now, it's kind of on pause. Might be in the past, we'll see. But it just afforded us some great conversations about the world and a little bit about family and fatherhood and even some entrepreneurial efforts you're a part of. So nods to Paul, right?
Nods to Paul.
Yeah. And so for everyone out there listening, maybe Cody, tell me a little bit about your forte. As you know, we're getting into fatherhood in a minute and we'll dive deep, but what's your day-to-day look like running an energy technology platform, which is how I would say it, but how would you describe your efforts, your career pursuits these days?
Yeah. My background's mostly in oil and gas as an engineer. I left the day-to-day to start a company to build software supporting oil and gas. And there's a lot of carryover into geothermal as well, which is pretty cool. It's essentially just a well management tool, tracking activities, costs, equipment, hitting a need within the industry and bringing some new insights into the industry as well.
Yeah. And you've been building this project, this business for this company for how long now? How long have you been working on it?
Yeah. I left my day job in 2021, so we're approaching 4 years. And yeah, was ideating on it for about 3 years prior to that, validating it, and here we are.
Cool. How 3 years validating it, and probably I wonder, was there some trepidation in there as well, or were you just like, no, it's just a matter of time before I do this? Or were you deliberating with, like, is this the path that I can take to really achieve, the family dynamic or the availability, or, what was the tussle in your head with family in mind, going out on your own as an entrepreneur? I just imagine, I'm feeling that some days. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was hard. I knew early on in my career that I wanted to um have my own business, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I didn't understand why. It was just kind of like an interest. Um and then uh my career essentially became my identity. And then after having kids, seeing the impact that had on how I approach fatherhood and being a husband, I realized that there needed to be a change. And that helped me kind of design what having my own company looked like, and what I wanted it to be. Uh, and then being able to view frustrations in my day-to-day job as opportunities and kind of flesh out um, which ones were good ideas and which ones were not so good ideas. And uh, the idea for this software I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I became obsessed over it. And I've got a wonderful supportive wife. And so she was able to help me carve out the time needed to really uh, put some detail to what this business was going to be. And yeah, here we are today.
Curious if you're willing to share a little bit more about the job being your identity and how that perhaps was a conflict. Ultimately, in hindsight, you can kind of see some clarity, or with clarity, you can see that it was a conflict with who you wanted to be as a father or as a partner or as a human, as a man. What Tell me a little bit more about that if you're.
Yeah. I think um, the biggest part of it was just, I guess in retrospect, after digging into a lot of that, it came down to, um, it'll be better when. And so we were looking at, I was trying to climb the corporate ladder as quick as I could. I wanted more influence within the company I was working for. I wanted to be able to drive change within the company. And um, I felt like every day I was coming in to prove myself. So that resulted in having an inflated ego and justifying leaving at 6 in the morning and getting home at 7 at night and just working those hours. And then, putting the full burden of raising our kids on my wife. Uh, And so, what kind of father was I in those times other than just sort of, the weekend warriors that are playing sports on the weekends? Well, I was a weekend warrior father where I'd try to step in and give my wife a break for a day or two so she can be ready for the next 5 days where I was missing out on seeing my kids essentially because they were asleep when I'd leave and they were just going to sleep when I'd come home. So, um, yeah, I was missing out on a lot. And that's when I realized, my identity is my career and not being a husband or a father.
Mm. How long did you sit with that? Was that like the switch or the flip of a switch, or was it a long weekend of holy crap, or maybe it took months for you to kind of reconcile that? What was that?
Yeah, it took a long time. There was a bout of depression in there,
Mhm.
uh, when I was wrestling with that and trying to figure out how do I make that change. Um, a lot of turbulence and trying to figure that out and knowing knowing what I wanted, but understanding where I was at. I couldn't just make that change overnight, um, in a way that was reasonable. And so, yeah, that I wrestled with it for quite a while.
Yeah. And I'm just doing some math. If you've had your business running for 4 years, you were thinking about it for 3 years. At that point, you had a 1-year-old. That about right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then when everything kind of, um when my focus shifted fully to, um trying to figure out what was next, we had our second by that time.
Mm.
So, yeah.
So the duties and the questions about life are piling up and kind of a forcing function to make some bold decisions. So hats off to you for like the courage, the bravery, the fortitude to go after something on behalf of your family and your own self, it sounds like. And I want to get into uh, maybe some of your kiddo factors here in a second, but hats off to Jenna for being the champion of your pursuits. And of course, it's a win-win, I suppose. If she supports you, then you can now support her a little bit better, and you have more of a partnership. But tell me this real quick, because I don't know this. How did you and Jenna become acquainted? How did you two meet, hit it off, and then end up building a life together?
Yeah, the short story is we were set up, by mutual friends, and, the longer version is we were both living in Montana. I was in Billings, she was in Bozeman. A friend of mine moved to Bozeman, and, uh, he was chasing a girl, and my wife knew his now wife, through just rec sports, and he said, "Hey, I need help moving." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Oh, by the way, I want to introduce you to somebody." And the rest
Amazing.
is history.
What's that person's name, by the way? The guy that your buddy.
Yeah. Joey Stazak, great dude.
Joey. Thanks for the hookup, Joey. Right? We got to give Joey a little nod too.
Yeah.
And that give me a year. Like when was that? That was
That was 2013.
awesome.
Yeah,
2013.
we met April of 2013. Um, we were married by December the next year.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Fast and furious, getting after it. And at that point, did you guys know, you know what? I want to have one kid, two kids, 19 kids. What was the vision early on?
Yeah, my wife jokes with me because she remembers, uh, when we were dating, she asked me how many kids I wanted, and I jokingly said 11.
You did.
Her eyes got real big. Um, and, but yeah, no, we have 4 kids. Uh, yeah, 8, 6, 3, and 1, and we're in it.
You are in it deep. Yeah. Well, and I've got, we both have a 1-year-old, but you have 3 extras and, I'm learning as I go. So I'm sure you've taken a lot of, or you've been afforded a lot of, lessons as a result of not just 1, but 4 kiddos. So, I mean, what have you learned about yourself from having kids, over the last 8 years? And maybe, I know we kind of got acquainted on some good topics for our conversation here. So anything front and center and recent is worthy too. But just over in general, what have you learned about yourself as a man, as a human being that you only could have learned because you had kids?
Yeah, I mean, kids are such a gift and blessing that um, for, like, the joy that they bring, but they also, they put you in situations where they test your patience, and you get to learn a lot about yourself and how you show up in those moments um, of the chaos that they bring. And, um, yeah, so just being able to, um, say being fortunate enough to being able to face those situations and have the opportunity to learn and grow from those experiences, and being able to continue to show up better and better every day because of that.
Yeah. Give me a couple examples. Like where does it get messy and where's the challenge present itself? And then how are you learning to navigate those things?
Oh man. I think most parents can relate to this, but when you get to about 4 o'clock in the evening and it's you know, everyone's hungry and you've got kids fighting or screaming and crying and just navigating those situations while you're trying to get dinner. I think a lot of it too is just it's just expectations. What am I expecting to get done? And what I've found is a lot of the moments of frustration come from um, me expecting to get more done than I can, given the circumstance, because there's other needs that need to be met.
Mhm.
So if the expectations to get dinner on the table by 5 and you've got homework and all these other things going on, and pretty soon it's 5:30, there's can result in being frustrated, but being able to understand that, oh, my expectation was just misaligned in that moment can solve a lot of problems.
So what are you drawing upon that maybe you didn't realize was going to be so essential? And, patience comes to mind. It's almost cliche that, as a parent, you have to be patient. But, I
Yeah.
mean, what else is there that you've been drawing on or calling on deep within yourself to be able to, sort through the, uh, the 4 pack and all those chaotic moments?
Yeah. Um, a lot of it is, I guess, the father that I am today is different than the father I was when we had our first, which is a good thing and to be expected. But there are a lot of learnings that I took from, you know, being a new father versus now being a father of 4. And one of those things is just understanding, um, a lot of it initially was, uh, do as I say, not as I do, um, which I was more just kind of resulted in a lot more corrections and being lopsided and, um, with corrections versus, uh, positive reinforcement. And so now my approach is a lot more of lead by example. How are we making, um, how are my actions making my kids feel? Do they feel loved? Do they feel safe? Do they feel secure in being themselves? Um, and knowing that the opportunity to uh, navigate certain situations are going to come through what I show them and not what I tell them to
Yeah.
do.
And then you kind of joked with a smile on your face. That's a recent revelation. I'm sure maybe you probably felt it early on, but you maybe wrangled it a little better these days. So I mean, who was Cody as a dad early on? What did it I appreciate the concept here, but what did it
And
look like early on when you only had, say, one kiddo, your
yeah,
first? Who is what was your fatherhood style then, and then contrast it to how you describe your approach these days?
yeah. As we just discussed a little bit ago, is a lot of my identity was in my career, and so I was a bit of like absentee father. I was around, uh, but like how I showed up was kind of this drop in, see my wife get frazzled, and then feel like I've got to lay the hammer down or fix the situation like right then and there. Um, and now it's just, yeah, it's just being being able to be around a lot more, be more present. And then when I'm in that, when I am, when the computer's turned off, the work is done, and I'm with the kids, then it's like, how am I fostering them in these moments? And again, making sure that they feel loved and safe, um, which I think are the two most important things, raising a kid.
And I feel like I asked you a question to set up our time together, and you had actually said you didn't say safe, but that's totally fair that it's in there. You said loving, consistent, and a guide are the components of what it means to be a legendary father. So tell me a little bit more about adding safety in there for sure, but what does it mean to be a guide for your kiddos?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just understanding that they're going to mirror a lot of your actions, and so being a guide is a lot of leading by example. Um, Giving your kids the opportunity to see how you show up in certain situations, they're going to pick up a lot of that um, as opposed to just doing what you're telling them to do.
I think that word guide is such it's a distinction for us as fathers, right? And it kind of articulates what you're saying is like, what's the opposite or the contrast of a guide? Uh, the old Cody, the younger father version of Cody, where it was direction and correction. What's the contrast to guide with that in mind? What were you? If you're now a guide, you were what?
Yeah, it's funny when I was typing that out, I was trying to think of what that what a good analogy is for that. And I was having trouble with it. I keep wanting to say coach, but there's a lot of positive things that you can get from being a coach. Um,
The
and
boss.
yeah, I think a
You're kind of the
boss. Yeah,
boss.
a boss is a good one. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Maybe we play with that a bit. It's like, how many times are we as dads in boss mode versus guide mode.
Yeah.
And right now I'm just adoring my little kiddo. Although he's now climbing on everything. He's climbing up on the couch, over uh the armrest, onto an ottoman, which is kind of a block and tackle strategy we have for this little space that we don't want him to get to. And it's like,
Mhm.
he doesn't get no yet. He doesn't understand that. He kind of does. If I say his name a little bit differently, I'm like, Leo, get, he's like, oh, so he's kind of comprehending that, but you can't even be the boss of a 1 year old.
Yeah.
You, so at, at, at a certain point, I do feel like well, maybe in certain circumstances, it's going to be important to be able to be the boss. Sometimes, are you still the boss every now and then? Do you need to be the boss every now and then?
Yeah, I think there's moments where you need to be a little bit more firm, and you need to um there is a need for um a certain level of correction, but it's just like uh if I guess my new approach that brings a lot more patience, and I guess how I can be a lot more patient is really starting to ask them, because our kids are finally getting old enough now of um would you like it if somebody else was doing that to you? That comes up a lot, many, many times a day. And it just, you know, showing them like my curiosity in those moments of um trying to understand a certain situation, but then guiding them through those questions of like, okay, if you were in their shoes, help them empathize with the other person in those moments, where there's some conflict or just different things going on. It's I think I think that's where a lot of the patience comes from. Being able to ask those questions, be curious, and again, be the guide, the boss.
But historically, you were like, cut it out, quit doing that to your brother or your sister.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, when what I realized having looking back at, there's certain situations that are first, how he responds in those situations, um, is such a prime example of like how much attention we are able to give him, and because we had the capacity to give him all the attention when he was the only child. And then even having two, you're still playing man to man at that point. And so those kids got a lot more attention. That also means, especially with our first, we didn't want to waste a moment. Every opportunity was a learning opportunity. But
Mm.
with that came a heavy amount of correction, as opposed to just letting them be themselves and figure some things out on their own. And now we've got our fourth, who's one and climbing all over everything, and his experience is way different than it was with our first and second for sure.
Oh. And you were telling me that you've noticed, and I wonder how recent this was, this observation, but you're noticing your kiddos, the ones that are, I would say, what, probably the 8 and 6 year old, maybe the 3 year old, they're mirroring each other. They're learning behaviors from each other. And you probably, you saw that happening, and it was unproductive. It was a lot of telling. They're telling, from what I'm extrapolating here, so confirm, but
Yeah.
they're telling each other what to do, and you're going, that's not productive. Cut that out. And then you realized, where are they learning that from? And it turns out they're mirroring you and
Yeah.
perhaps your wife. I don't know, but they're mirroring us. Our kiddos are obviously mirroring us. They're learning from us by example, and they're just emulating our behaviors. Did that smack you across the face, that revelation, or was it kind of like a slow build? How did it strike you?
Yeah, it was a bit of a slow build, because it was a lot of why did they just say that to each other? Where did they get that from? And Um, yeah, it was, uh, it was just seeing how they were interacting with each other just made me realize, oh, they're learning that from me. And there's a what kids are really good at doing is showing the gap between the person we aspire to be and the person that we are actually. um, and they'll expose that really fast. And a lot of frustration can live within that gap. So you got to be really mindful. And that's where when I started being really mindful and trying to change my approach of being, okay, I need to be less bossy. I need to be more of a guide.
Perfect. How have they responded since you and wouldn't you say you've made this distinct shift? Like, I'm sure you were processing it and intending to make the shift, and maybe even you revert back still a little bit, but at what point do you feel like, "You know what? I've shifted my own habits, my own behaviors." Was that 2 months ago? Was that a year ago? Whereabouts?
Yeah, I think probably within the last 10 to 12 months was when I started being a lot more intentional. And seeing the fruits of that is has been um it's just been awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you the reactions or the impact on each of them. What have you noticed about how they've maybe adjusted their own approach to things as a
Yeah,
result?
you definitely start to see it trickle down the same as, the bossiness worked its way down, sort of the waterfall effect. Uh, you know, you, you start changing your ways and how you lead. It follows that same path. And so you start seeing them uh, be more curious with each other and be more patient with each other. If you're being more patient with them, they're they're more of a they're going to be more of a mirror of you than they are going to be a follower of instructions.
I like that notion of the waterfall, right? And as parents, we're at the top of the waterfall, of course, and what we put in is gonna work its way down, um, down to the bottom there. So,
Yeah.
how are you what do with this shift in mind and the ripple effect or the waterfall effect, how what's it like to watch your 8-year-old interact with your 1-year-old or your 8 kinda lead the pack, maybe the 6 I'm just picturing, what's possible here. The 6-year-old taking on some leadership, some ownership of what, the activity is. The 3-year-old, is she you were telling me she's, like, just as feisty, perhaps even more resilient and
Mhm.
audacious than the 3 of them, but, how are they interacting? What's the dynamic look like with this new approach for them?
Yeah, I mean, uh, you know, their personalities are all so different. Um, but yeah, seeing how they interact with each other, like they're getting. I guess a lot of our approach has just allowed them to, um, it's setting the examples for how they interact with each other, how we resolve conflicts, and kind of laying that foundation and that groundwork. Um, you know, snapping at someone and saying, "Do it this way," or "That's wrong." Like, isn't the approach being more patient and understanding and letting that stuff happen is good. Um, but yeah, I mean, seeing like the 8-year-old emulate me, how I wrestled with them, wrestling with our 1-year-old, uh, being able to tone it down, uh, is pretty awesome. Like, it's pretty cool to see that stuff and they're playing together and the different combinations of them playing together is kind of, each one has their own, because of their ages, have a different level of attention span. And so, the 1-year-old's in and out constantly, and the 3-year-old is engaged a little bit longer, but then still also bouncing in and out. And then uh, our 8 and 6-year-old are thick as thieves, playing, coming up with games and stuff together. It's pretty neat.
Take me back with your 8 and 6-year-old. Take me back to when you had a 2-year-old and you're about to have the second one. I mean, imagine I've got one right now, and one
Yeah.
day might have a second or third. It's like, what, what was how did you set him up for what was about to come about? Was there he's a 2-year-old. So it's like, how much can he really comprehend? But, what did you do to prepare him for, a new factor in his life?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just, you know, they see the changes in mom as she goes through pregnancy, and then they start noticing things around the house getting moved around, and there's some big changes for them in those times, and so they're moving from a crib or a little bed into a different room, maybe into a different type of bed, and so I think they really pick up on the change for sure. Um, and in preparation, you know, y- you'll see you'll see when kids are around that 2-year-old age, even if they're not expecting another sibling, when you're out and about, they're pointing out babies and
Mm,
they start to realize they're different. They're different than the baby. And the baby is different from who they are at 2. Um, and so I think they're just intuitively those like kids kind of understand like, oh, this is a different baby. They require different care. Um, they understand like, the majority of dolls are babies, and they see other kids playing with dolls and treating them as babies around that age too. And so they kind of have an idea of like what's going on. Now, navigating like a 3-year-old or with a 1-year-old that naps is probably one of the biggest challenges being a parent. Um, uh,
Tell me, I mean, give me what makes that so challenging. I can assume, but tell me what you're thinking.
yeah, 3-year-olds are just very impulsive, and they really want the autonomy to be able to do what they want to do. They're starting, if they're not already, they're starting to potty train. And so they're being more of a person, but yet they're not quite capable
Yes.
of doing everything on their own. And so there's a lot of battles. And with that, there's a lot of, uh, they lose a bit of the ability to modulate their volumes.
Because they're frustrated. Is that fair?
Yeah, a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. And then with the 1-year-old sleeping, you're like, please, please, just go to the other room and vent, so we can let the nugget take a rest, huh?
Yeah.
So give me a little bit of tap me into. I've got a 1-year-old. You have a 1-year-old too, but there's 3 ahead. You know, what can I anticipate the next couple years looking like? You've had multiple kids go through one, from 1 and beyond. It's like, what's it gonna be like potentially? No guarantees for sure, but what do I get to look forward to, and what are some of like the most challenging aspects of say the next 2 or 3 years that you're like, Dave, heads up, be ready. This is gonna be interesting at the least.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think as dads, we find out our significant others expecting, and we start picturing what it means to be a dad and be a father. And, you know, just as humans, how we were designed to be is, our earliest memories usually start around, we might have snapshots around 4 or 5, but then at 5, you start having those memories. That's 5 years of before you get to do a lot of the things that you're picturing with doing with your kiddo, because you're falling back on a lot of those memories. At least maybe that's more specific to me, and kind of being brought up as essentially an only child. I've got a sister that's 8 years older than me, and so um, yeah, so the playing ball and uh, building Legos and stuff that can start a little bit earlier, but there's a period in there where, as a dad, your main job is just supporting your wife and um, making sure your kiddos' needs are met. They've got food, and you can feed them and change them and bathe them and do a lot of that stuff. But the fun stuff that us dads think about when we find out that we're going to be a father, camping and all that good stuff. We got to be patient with that. But it's been really cool to see. Um, I love watching our 1 year old explore his world. Our 3 year olds, each of their worlds are different sizes.
Oh,
Um,
oh, cool.
and it's just really cool to see how they exist in those worlds, and where those worlds overlap, and how the play, um, how the play just like just how they exist together in those areas of overlap is really neat as well. But we had a moment um the other night at dinner, and we were talking about something, and it just hit our 8 year old's funny bone. Like it was a silly kind of dad jokey moment that my wife actually made, and he had just taken a drink of water, and he could not contain it, and just was laughing so hard he was trying to hold it in. And it was just a moment of just joy at the table, and silliness, and just fun. And we're seeing more and more of those moments where um now our more adult world, um like our 8 year old bubble is overlapping a lot more with our bubble, and it's really cool to see.
That's so fun. I see what you mean. I can just picture just a little bit of like the Venn diagram, just a little bit of overlap of each of them, but they are in their own worlds. Their own imaginations are different, and their, comprehension of even like motor skills, and
Mhm.
what it means to have fun for the 1 year old is different than the 3 year old, and so forth. That's a lot of a lot of different realms to observe your nuggets in. I'm curious on almost the relationship side with you and Jenna, as just how it's evolved over this. And of course, if you just had one kid, and now from age 1 to age 8, it would have evolved. But then you have a second one, a third one, and a fourth one. How has your relationship evolved? And then what level of actual, like, intentionality and strategy and family planning, how did that evolve as well? Because I feel like maybe right now, Mackenzie and I are kind of just flying by the seat of our pants. We want to
Yeah.
be intentional. We like that idea, but and then as a little bit of stability comes around, or we get the hang of things, now we're wrangling a bit of a rhythm, and we can be even more intentional. But we're winging it more than we are, executing the strategy. So I just sense that maybe you can be a little bit more of a a planned out, uh, you know, family partner guiding, at this point, or maybe I'm making an assumption. So just to summarize, the evolution of your relationship and how you've approached it strategically, raising your family.
Yeah, we're definitely not perfect at it, and there's a lot of room for improvement. It does, you know, we have moments where each kid is asking a question at the same time, and we're just like, "What is going on?" And at any moment, with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, there are high demands. And so um, we're definitely split in a lot of different directions. And so that requires being a lot more intentional. And um, I've been far from perfect on how I show up, but just seeing, I think a lot of it's just observing um, the situation that our partner is in those moments, acknowledging it, making sure that they feel seen, um, through a lot of the day-to-day struggle, and then just, you know, taking 100% of accountability for your piece of it. The share of the pie might not be equal, but, um, making sure that you're 100% accountable for your piece of that I think is really helpful, and just understanding that you could take on some of that load when necessary and when you can, and making sure your partner feels comfortable and knowing that they can call on you and you'll show up when needed.
So if you and Jenna were both here, would you have a list of, say, values and characteristics that you're trying to bestow on your kiddos that you both would share? And are you thinking, we want our kids to be raised in this way? You've got that shared vision? I suspect to some degree it's either implied or it's explicitly down on paper somewhere. I mean, what do you think are the key things that you want your kids to take on as characteristics to empower them going forward over the next 10 years for each of them?
Yeah, I think, uh, we don't have anything down on paper, which is this might be a good opportunity, leaving this conversation to take that moment, to do that. But we're our biggest intention is to raise our kids in a Christian household, and we guide them so that they understand what that means, um, and share with them, like, the the abundance of, um the abundance of good things that come out of that, uh, how we treat others, and just how we show up, very much love first, um, type action. Yeah, that's our foundation. But then going from there, we should probably be a little bit more intentional with that.
Yeah. I mean,
Spend the
maybe just
time.
feel it with me here philosophically. What do you feel like looking at the nature of the world these days and maybe things that are timeless about the world we live in, and then maybe the unique things that are present front and center right now? What are the, I don't know, top 3 or 4 characteristics that you feel like if we do anything by the time they're 18 and they scoot out of the house, 19, 20, whatever it's going to be, we got to set them up with A, B, and C so that they can be so that they can thrive, you might say. What are those in your mind?
Yeah, I think just understanding how to show up, and takes on a takes on a different meaning for every situation. Um, but, being able to show up in uh, for people in the community, being able to showing up shows others that you are reliable, and in doing so, that there comes a level of responsibility in each of those moments, and accountability, and um, yeah, I think that's a big thing. And then understanding, like, I think helping them understand that, especially now, seeing, we've got kids that are learning how to read, and starting to compete in sports. It's helping them understand that they don't have to be perfect.
Mm.
Um, and if it's something that they truly want, that it takes, you got to dedicate some time and effort to get better. It's not just going to happen overnight. You're not just going to be the best. Um, Makes it a little easier to explain to an 8-year-old who's observing an infant who's learning how to walk, because you could start using the crawl, walk, run analogy, and they can see it in real time.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think those are kind of spitballing. Those are the things that come to mind right now.
Yeah, I wrote down a few. You said a few of these, and then, but just being a community member, like having compassion, right?
Yeah,
Right.
compassion for sure.
Being reliable, being accountable to, your commitments. That's kind of reliable as well. But, and then you almost said work ethic, and like being able to overcome and treat things like a learning opportunity versus getting frustrated and defeated. So that's on like growth mindset. So how, I mean,
Yeah.
where are you seeing, I could see for an 8-year-old some opportunities to showcase or to show them the value of work ethic and being growth minded and being reliable. What does that look like for a 6-year-old? What does that look like for a 3-year-old? It's got to show up differently, of course.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing these little opportunities to teach them these lessons?
Yeah, it's so different from kid to kid, and there's so much of we're seeing a lot of the um, birth order stuff come out, and that's really interesting and how that's shaping their personalities. But then just their personalities are different within that, and yeah, it definitely, they each have their different interests. But when you start to understand what those interests are, you start to think of like, how do I foster this more?
Mm,
And I think a lot of parents press into that maybe a little bit more than they need to. A lot of the sports stuff these days is like, you commit to the one sport by whatever age so that they can focus on that a lot. And I think the ages of our kids is still very much exploratory, and just giving them enough opportunities to explore as much as they can and be exposed to as much as they can so they can start to identify um, what they want to start to focus on a little bit more. And you'll just see that come out naturally. And it changes. They'll spend a short period of time, or um, the our oldest just brought a keyboard up from the basement, and I have never said anything to him about it, about playing it or anything like that. But he gets home from school, he goes straight to his room and he spends some time just like messing around with it, making some noise. And then before bed, and the other kids see it and then they're interested in it and they want to start playing around with it. So it's a lot of just really exploring and then providing the opportunities for them to take it to the next level if they want to.
I love that. It's got to be some fun. I remember when I had a keyboard myself, and I think I ended up coloring it more than playing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could just, philosophically with me again, like, if you, with the wisdom you have now, with the awareness you have now, with the firsthand experience you have now, if you were to go back and give yourself 10 years ago, 9 years ago, as you're approaching fatherhood, the the three key things that you need to know or that you should do, what are those things in your mind?
Yeah, I think just a lot of it comes down to just being more patient and understanding where the expectations lie. Being able to take a minute to be like, okay, identify where the frustration is and understand how my expectations could be um, tilting that scale one way or another that's causing could be causing more conflict in a moment. Um, yeah, and then like kids are s- kids are so smart and capable, and just being able to they want to be involved, and they want to be in the mix of everything that's going on. And so giving them the opportunities to, you know, have be in the kitchen and play with some flour while you're making stuff, and letting them tear the lettuce when you're making a salad, or putting some silverware away, or pushing the broom around while you're dusting or whatever. Like they want to be a contributing member to your family. Um, Even though at those early ages they make more messes than they they clean up.
So
Um,
is your advice with that one, like, embrace the opportunities to, let them explore and learn, or what's kind of the wisdom within that you'd give yourself?
yeah, I think, yeah, yeah, I think a lot of it is more just like let a lot of those situations be, because I was so focused on like every moment, no matter what they were doing, it was a moment to teach, and through that came a lot of those corrections, and it just wasn't the right approach. And so I think just being able to observe and understand like your kiddo for who they are, and how are they playing with that toy, instead of guiding that. Like, because that's interesting use of the word, because we've been using it with more of a positive um uh connotation. But this is, in this moment, like you don't have to guide them. Let them be the guide in some of those moments of how they're playing with a toy. You know, let them lead the play, uh, and then maybe you can show them a little trick or two with how you push the ball, or how you can make it go faster or farther, whatever. But um, yeah, I don't know if I can pin it to one word or phrase, but I think a lot of it's just sort of, you know, enjoy figuring out, enjoy learning who your kids are.
Oh, cool. I like it. I like how you put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first one was like, learn to harness patience because it's going to serve you incredibly well. Uh, Learn to just observe and watch your kids, unfold a bit. Like let it unfold and savor that experience. Are there other things in there? If you could go back 9 years ago, you're like giving yourself some heads up. One of those one of those nuggets, like nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, I think again, just a lot of I think, yeah, for me a lot it came from really digging into where my identity was at and what it was. And I had the luxury of having the space to be able to do that. And um yeah, but I think
But
just being I don't know, there's something special. You're given this gift of caring for a child, and even in the messiness, there's joy to be found when you're dealing with a blowout diaper, and it's just like things are going comically awry.
yes,
Uh, I think just find the joy in those moments.
I love that. Okay, now I want to hear a little bit about your dynamic. Three little boys and a girl. So what's it like raising boys, raising girls? What's the difference for you? And then in your particular order, what are you noticing about, the feminine, the masculine, and them sorting out who they are and how hard they play or what their interests are? What are you noticing?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we had our 2 boys, and then we found out we are having a girl, and a lot of it was and my wife too even mentioned it to me. It's just like how we only knew boys. We were getting kinda comfortable in boys and their energy and just how boys are. Um, and we got this girl, and the question came up of just like, how do we navigate this? Like, how do we go from having boys and guiding them towards, more masculinity to a girl and bringing, fostering her femininity and, um, by design, they are who they are and they come out and their personalities come out and our girl is all girl, um, pink and, we weren't forcing anything on her. It was just like who she is and, um, but at the same time, like she's in the mix with the boys. She's jumping on the piles and, um, she's tougher than all those boys and kind of just because she wants to be in the mix with them. And yeah, but at the same time, it's like twirly dresses. Give me the sparkly dress. Now watch me spin, that type of stuff. It's really cool.
That's awesome. So, if you can anticipate the next kind of 5 years with your, your arrangement and what's the right word here? Kind of like the composition of your family. Like, what does the next 5 years look like? What are you excited about? What challenges are you anticipating?
Yeah, I think, um, so we were fortunate enough to observe, my wife's sister whose family lived right down the road, and they were just a couple of years ahead of us with 4 kids, and we could see them how that changed, and they kinda got out of the really hard season of having a kid that's napping and, just the demands that younger kids bring, and coming out of that into a season where they are doing a lot more as a family as a whole. Um, it's really cool. And so I think if our family stays the size that it is now, then we're approaching the sweet spot before we are dealing with the teen stuff, but not dealing with baby stuff anymore.
Right.
Um, I, I think it's going to be a really cool and fun season that we're entering into.
Right. A little bit more cohesion in the wolf pack than
Yeah.
spanning too many different lifestyles or mindsets. So that's going to be fun. How about the challenges? I mean, if you got your family down the block, like what do you see as the nuances and challenges of those next couple years?
Yeah. I think a lot of the challenges are, you're going to get, there's going to be a lot of pressure in um, participating in a lot more activities.
Yep.
And then you got split schedules, and then you're back to dividing and conquering in those moments. And so I think navigating that and being mindful of uh, of securing space in the calendar for when we are all able to be together and connect, and not just on like holidays and stuff like that, but having those times. But again, you get into those ages where they can start to you start to play games a lot more and you're teaching and that kind of, you know, that stuff picks up pretty quick once they can start picking up games. I think with our 8-year-old a couple of years ago, we kind of introduced chess a little bit and he picked it up pretty quickly, which was just a surprise. But then like, realizing war is a pretty easy game to pick up with
Yeah.
a deck of cards and it helps them learn the different values of the individual cards. And once they got that, then, you teach you teach the oldest and then the second wants to partake in it and they're always working hard on keeping up, and so they naturally just pick things up quickly, and then next thing you know, the other night, we had, the 2 of them had set up the chessboard themselves and started playing, and um, they would run into the room I was in and ask a question, "Hey, can this piece do this?" Or, "How does this work?" And then go in and say, "Okay, this piece needs to go here," and then, working on, uh, with that type of stuff, like, it again, comes back that waterfall effect. You start seeing being able to do stuff with the older one, and then the younger ones kind of pick it up, and uh, you get in that mix, and then there's a lot more opportunities for really cohesive family time. Those moments of bonding over um, those types of experience, rather than one person putting a baby to bed and the other person making sure the 3-year-old is getting what they need, and then the other two kind of off on their own and not getting the attention from the parents that they probably need in those moments.
Right. So I'm hearing challenges is almost you're anticipating time management, just like anybody with anything, but especially interesting with 4 kiddos and different interests and agendas. And yet the opportunity to really embrace play as a family, be a cohesive unit, have fun together, all be, having some degree of shared interests. That's going to be a special time.
Yeah.
So Cody, final question, and I want you to maybe just take some breaths as I'm asking this and truly tap into what you're struck by. But I just want you to picture decades in the future. Your kiddos are grown up. They're separated by 7 years, I suppose, but they're all in their, let's say, their 60s or 70s, and they've got a couple generations with them sitting around a campfire, and they're reflecting on the father that they had in Cody.
Mhm.
What are the 3 things that you hope you're known for? What does it sound like for them to describe those 3 things in a sentence or 2 for each of them?
Man, I think this kind of comes back a little bit to that gap between the person we aspire to and the person that we are today. And I think, that I think both of those are going to continue to move up as you become closer to the person you aspire to. The person you aspire to kind of can also kind of change. But I think, I want them, I want to pass along as much of my wisdom to them. A lot of people talk about knowledge transfer, but I think it's more wisdom transfer. And so I want to pass along as much wisdom as I can, so that then they can pick up from where I left off sooner, and become even, and take that to whatever length they can. Um, and I think through that, it's just setting a good example, being a rock for them, making sure that they're loved and safe, so that they don't have they don't have to worry as much, and they can focus on being who they are.
So I heard almost 2 big themes in there. Hopefully they say something like, Dad gave us so much wisdom and knowledge. He equipped us with a great understanding of the world. Is that the first
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
And he empowered us to, you know, make the most of this one adventure. And then the second one, how does that one sound coming out of their mouth?
I think more just like how, just being supportive. Um,
So
you know,
he always had our back. He gave
yeah.
us unconditional love.
Yeah. And, I always give my kids an opportunity to try. And so if they're asking for my help, the expectation is that they try, or my help is not doing things for them. It's helping guide them through what they're trying to figure out and sort out. Now, I'll tie my 3-year-old shoes, but at a certain age, they're going to have to try.
Yeah.
And for the age appropriate stuff, it's, I don't want to take, I don't want to take that stuff away from them, those opportunities away from them. So they'll know that I'll be behind them and supportive the whole way through. And it's okay to not get it right and slip and fall. But I'm also not going to do it for them.
So dad always had our back. He was an amazing guide, and he was the steward we needed to learn and learn on our own, but also count on him for some of the how to, the tell, but more of the guide. What's the third one? Is there a third one? What's the final thing you hope your kids describe you as or say about you?
Oh, just I'm funny, probably.
Dad was the silliest son of a gun ever.
Dad had a funny sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome, man. It's been fun learning a little bit about your journey as a father and hearing about your kiddos, hearing about your wife, and I appreciate your time. So, Cody, thanks for joining me on Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. We'll see you soon. There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones, and please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that intel as I grow Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, Dad, go Dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now.